Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel. Now this vid is a redo of the one that was done about an hour or so ago, I guess, about Western civilization in despair. I received quite a few complaints that the sound quality was bad, and so I'm thinking I need to do it again. And I'll make a special mention to a very long-standing subscriber of mine, Tropical Coda, and if he says it needs to be better, well, that's it. It's got to be better. So I've decided to upgrade. I've got a Ben Shapiro talking thing coming along, so I'm gonna hammer it out at high speed, all to look after you guys. You understand? So let's come back to that video. I have to add as well for listeners. Normally the videos I do are scripted. These live chats are not scripted. I'm talking without notes off the top of my head, so there's the pauses and the ums and the ahs that you don't see in a tightly scripted and produced vid. And I think I've mentioned earlier, it takes 6 to 8 hours even to do a 8 to 10 minute vid. And so with that, I've tried to increase the output. I've got a long list of subjects I wanted to cover, and it was getting longer, and given the amount of production time, I thought I'd try this live chat method. So we'll see how it goes, and maybe it doesn't work out, maybe it will, but it does allow me to cover more subjects and topics. So this one, just after all that, the issue here is that the level of despair in Western civilization and across the entire Western bloc, so the United States, Canada, Australia, Britain, and even Western Europe. So the first world countries of the West, nearly all white, are in a state, I would argue, a state of despair, particularly sort of from the youth through to the middle age, and particularly when kids are sort of getting out of high school and going into college. Now, there's a number of reasons for this despair and a number of causes as well. So what this vid is about is looking at those causes and those reasons, and just have a look at the false narrative that we're being given and spoon-fed by the globalists and the media they control, and indeed the body politic, as to where these problems are coming from. So let's just look at what is the despair all about. I don't think we've seen this despair in certainly in Europe, in white populations, since the Middle Ages. So it's that long ago, I think we can see this levels of despair. Not that there haven't been moments of despair. For example, the lowest ebb in World War II and things like that. There have been moments of despair, but this is a deeply entrenched despair that seems to have nowhere to go and nowhere to express itself other than self-hatred, which is the path it appears to be going on at the moment. So let's just look at that Western civilizational despair. Now, for younger people, they don't have the sort of future that certainly I had, or my parents had. There's very little future possibilities for them, whereas 7 out of 10 jobs 50 years ago could have provided what we would call today a middle-class lifestyle. Today, only 1 in 10 can, when we deduct off the increased credit that people can access and the inheritances. But when we take that away, if we just look at the purchasing power of the paycheck in isolation, only 1 in 10 jobs can deliver a middle-class lifestyle, or even what we would call a reasonably well-to-do working-class lifestyle. So as children coming out of, or young adults coming out of high school and graduating to college, they look at a future down the track and say, well, where are the jobs going to come from? Well, what sort of standard of living am I going to have working at the takeout chicken shop? What sort of standard of living am I going to have working part-time as a social worker in the mean streets of Baltimore and that sort of thing? So there just isn't the jobs there that are going to pay that lifestyle. In addition to that, students that would have flunked out of junior high school years ago are being encouraged, if not indirectly forced, to go into higher education, senior high school and college, and in so doing studying bullshit degrees, lesbian dance major and so on, and they're still leaving college with these degrees that won't qualify them for anything. and they're leaving college with a debt of $50,000 or $60,000 that they may never pay. So they're going out into the workforce with this debt that they can't service, with well-paying jobs that don't exist anymore, certainly not in the numbers that they used to. And so they're looking at the future in some sort of despair. Now, they can't afford to buy property. They can't really afford to get married. They can't afford to have children. They can't afford to have a stake in society that certainly my generation had and the generation before that. Now, not having a stake in society is a big thing. You've just got no skin in the game. Why are you going to get up in the morning? Is it to pay that college debt for that bullshit degree you've got? Is it to go and work at the job in the takeout chicken shop that's never going to get you anywhere? What is it exactly? Why are you going to get out of bed in the morning? And this whole generation of people, I think, are consumed with the level of despair that is fairly new and fairly recent, or certainly since the late 1990s or mid 1990s onwards. Now, in addition to that, children going through school and college are taught to hate their own society, to hate everything their society's achieved. Their societies are bad. By default, they are bad. And they should feel guilty. They should feel ashamed. They should cower. They should hang their heads. So this is taking away pride and a sense of accomplishment in one's own society, and taking away this idea that there's any grounding in society. If we look at other factors, social factors such as the increase in the divorce rate. Years ago, it may be 5% of kids came out of divorced households. Now it's nearly 50% of kids coming out of divorced households. Most not having a father in the home or never seeing the father. This is not exclusively a black problem, by the way. It's also affects the white society as well. And the NGOs, if you look at how the NGOs, they prey on young girls who've come out of single parent households. They gravitate them like flies to shit to bring these angry young girls, frustrated with no sense of proportion, no sense of future, no sense of a past. And they take these young girls in and they radicalise them. So we're looking at generations of kids who are susceptible to radicalisation through the high school and through the college system, with so-called professors that again would have flunked out of junior high school years ago. The very notion that you would call these people professors is beyond the pale. So these things are going on which are removing all confidence, all self-confidence, and all societal self-confidence. In addition to that, jobs are being sent offshore, and we know all this, but jobs are being sent offshore to India and China, which is causing a reduction in the amount of available employment, and certainly well-paying employment. Masses of third world people are brought in, which depresses wages, which in particular is affecting the black population. If you look at the wages at the very bottom end, and you can probably, I don't know if anyway you can hear this. There's birds screeching in the background. They're Australian sulphur-crested cockatoos, and I think you're going to hear. I can see some kookaburras out there, which may start cackling pretty soon, so you may hear that in background. It'll add to the ambience of the discussion here. So black people and people at the bottom end of the wage scale are particularly affected by this bringing in of masses of third world peasant labour. So these jobs, the jobs that black people would tend to have had at the bottom end of the scale, their rate of increase in wages, and this is relative to cost of living, of course, has been the slowest of all pay categories and groups. So if we look at, say, somebody working in a warehouse as a general hand, they were paid, say, $5,000 a year in the early 1970s. Well, today they're paid about $35,000 a year. So the average wage appreciation there has been over that time, say, sevenfold. Now, if you compare that with, say, housing, which in some areas has increased by 100-fold, whereas wages have only increased 7-fold, and you can see just how far down the line or far down the pole that the people at the bottom end have fallen due to this intensive migration from the third world. So the average increase in wages has been between, say, 10 and 11-fold over that nearly 50-year period, but at the bottom end, about 7-fold. So that gives you an idea of the differential that the blacks are falling further and further behind yet they're encouraged to see that their problem has nothing to do with bringing in masses of cheap peasant labour from the third world. It has nothing to do with sending jobs offshore to China and India. It's all part of some white supremacist, white fragility and so on, which of course it has nothing to do with that. That's not even a relevant point of the discussion. So the despair that not only blacks are feeling, but many whites as well, that level of despair across all these areas, because social, financial, considering the future, capacity to service debt, all these things are contributing to an overall level of despair and sense of futility, perhaps even more than despair. And this is what we're seeing, I believe, this is what we're seeing today. Now, the control of the media and the body politic and the globalist cabal generally, they have very successfully channeled this anger and sense of futility and sense of frustration. They've channeled that into race and gender conflict, particularly race conflict. So the issue is working class and middle class whites have stolen it all from you, which is absurd when you think about it, utterly absurd. It's the big financial end of town that's orchestrated this whole thing of offshoring jobs, getting people saddled with credit, getting the universities and the tertiary sector to charge outrageous sums of money for bullshit degrees. All this is what's causing the despair and the sense of futility. But instead, people are being directed into the same angry and frustrated people are being directed into thinking it's a white supremacist thing. And the Marxist argument, well, look, the outcomes are different between hardworking whites and lazy everyone else. Therefore, the problem must be racial, which of course it isn't, and which it never was. So this is the path we're going down, into a self-destructive path that cannot end well, no matter how you look at it. And if the people at the apex who are orchestrating this and pulling the strings and using their puppets in the White House or in Westminster Houses of Parliament, if they're looking down the road, they may think they're immune. They may think they're going to be immune from the consequences of this. But in the end, it'll turn into a situation where we're all going to be eaten alive by it, and it's not going to end in a good place. So I hope this has been a better take on things, and that the sound quality is better. So this is Tassos today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.